3 seedlings, one night. That's all it took for cutworms to wipe out an entire flat of tomato starts I'd spent 6 weeks carefully growing. And I still remember walking into the garden at 6 a.m., coffee in hand, staring at the tiny stubs where my plants used to be. If you've been gardening for more than a season, you already know the struggle. Neem oil 1 week, diatomaceous earth the next, floating row covers that need to be adjusted every time the wind picks up. You've tried the sprays, you've tried the traps, and some of them work for a while, but then the next wave of aphids, squash bugs, or caterpillars arrives, and suddenly you're fighting the same battle all over again. I spent years looking for better ways to deal with garden pests before discovering a completely different approach, one that focuses less on fighting pests after they appear and more on preventing problems before they start. That led me to the traditional methods used by many Amish growers. For generations, many Amish farmers and gardeners have relied on careful observation, smart planting strategies, and natural systems to maintain productive gardens. What caught my attention wasn't a secret product or an expensive solution. It was a simple gardening method that seemed almost too easy at first, because it wasn't about killing every insect that entered the garden. It was about creating a garden environment where pests were much less likely to become a serious problem. And once I understood the reason behind it, everything started to make sense. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the complete system, not just one quick trick, because this approach works best when several small habits come together. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand how traditional gardeners have used these principles to build healthier, more resilient gardens. Here's the thing most gardening content gets backwards. It treats pest control like a response. Something shows up, you react. Something eats your leaves, you spray. Something lays eggs in your soil, you dust. And the whole season turns into a series of firefights that exhaust you and still leave you with damaged crops. But the traditional approach used by many Amish growers looks at the problem differently, and I'm calling it a framework deliberately because that's what it actually is. It isn't one secret spray or one miracle plant. It's a way of building a garden that becomes naturally more resistant to pest pressure. The idea is simple. Pests are often a symptom, not the root problem. When a garden lacks balance, when the soil is struggling, when plants are grown too closely together, or when the timing is wrong, problems become much easier for pests to exploit. Instead of waiting until insects arrive and trying to defeat them, this approach focuses on stacking small advantages in your favor before the problem ever begins. And everything I'm about to walk you through builds toward that balance. The first piece, soil health, is your first line of defense. This was one of the hardest lessons for many gardeners to accept because it doesn't feel like pest control at all. Most people think about pests above the ground. They see the holes in the leaves, the insects crawling on the stems, and they immediately look for something to spray. But the foundation starts below the surface. Healthy soil helps plants grow stronger, develop better roots, and handle stress more effectively. And stressed plants are often more vulnerable when pests arrive. This is why many traditional gardeners put so much attention into the soil before worrying about insects. They understand that a healthy garden starts with healthy growing conditions. So what does that mean practically? Before adding more fertilizers or products, learn what your soil actually needs. A basic soil test can tell you important information like pH, nutrient levels, and organic matter. If your soil is too acidic, too alkaline, or missing key nutrients, your plants may struggle even if you're doing everything else right. The solution is not a quick fix, it's gradual improvement, adding compost, increasing organic matter, and creating a healthier environment for the roots. You may not notice a dramatic change overnight. But season after season, the difference becomes obvious. The second piece, breaking the monoculture habit. This is where many gardeners, including myself, make a common mistake. We plant our gardens in perfect rows, tomatoes together, peppers together, squash in its own section, because it looks organized and easy to manage. But from a pest's perspective, it can create exactly what they are looking for. A large group of the same plant in one area creates an easy target. When a pest finds one plant it likes, it doesn't have to search very far for the next meal. Traditional gardens often take a different approach. Instead of separating everything into individual blocks, they mix plants together and create more diversity throughout the growing space. You might see herbs growing near vegetables, flowers mixed into food crops, and different plant families sharing the same area. At first, it may look less organized, but that diversity creates a more complicated environment for pests to navigate. A hungry insect searching for one specific crop suddenly has to deal with different scents, different textures, and different plants surrounding its target. The goal isn't to create a perfect wall that stops every insect. The goal is to make your garden less inviting and less predictable. A simple way to start is by avoiding large, uninterrupted sections of the same crop. Mix in aromatic herbs, flowers, or plants from different families throughout your garden. It doesn't require extra work. You're simply changing the way your garden is arranged. The third piece, timing as a weapon. Many gardeners fight pests because they are always one step behind. They notice the damage after it happens. But experienced gardeners pay attention to timing. Many pest problems follow patterns. Certain insects appear during specific seasons, temperatures, and stages of plant growth. Understanding those patterns gives you an advantage. Instead of asking, "How do I kill this pest?" you start asking, "When does this pest usually appear, and how can I make my plants stronger before that happens?" For some crops, that might mean starting plants earlier, using protective covers during vulnerable stages, or waiting until a certain pest window has passed before planting. The goal isn't to control everything with chemicals. It's to work with the timing of nature, instead of always fighting against it. And that is the bigger lesson behind these traditional methods. The strongest gardens don't wait for problems to appear. They are designed to prevent those problems from becoming overwhelming in the first place. So, you've got your soil moving in the right direction, you've broken up your monoculture rows, and you're watching soil temps instead of just the calendar. That's already more than most gardeners ever do. And honestly, if you stopped here, you'd see a real difference by midsummer. But there are two more layers to this system, and they're the ones that make it stick across seasons instead of just helping you survive one bad aphid year. The fourth piece, building a permanent insectary border. This is the part that surprised me most when I first saw it on that Amish farm. Not because it was complicated, but because it was so deliberately planted. Along the north edge of the main vegetable beds, there was a strip roughly 18 inches wide running the full length of the garden. It wasn't weedy or neglected, it was intentional. Yarrow, dill allowed to go to flower, fennel, sweet alyssum, and a few clumps of native coneflower. What that strip does is provide continuous bloom from early spring through hard frost, and continuous bloom means a continuous population of predatory and parasitic insects, lacewings, parasitic wasps, ground beetles, hoverflies. These are the creatures that eat your pest insects, parasitize their eggs, and keep populations from exploding in the first place. They need two things to stick around: nectar sources in undisturbed habitat. That 18-inch border provides both. The specific plants matter more than most people realize. Dill and fennel, when allowed to flower, attract parasitic wasps that specifically target tomato hornworm and cabbage worm eggs. Sweet alyssum draws hoverflies, whose larvae are voracious aphid predators. Yarrow hosts over 100 beneficial insect species. I've seen that number cited enough times from enough independent sources that I'm comfortable repeating it, even if I can't hand you a single study. Native coneflower carries the season into fall when everything else is finished. You don't need a large space.
Even a 12-inch wide strip along one edge of your garden or a dedicated pot near each bed if you're working in a smaller space will make a measurable difference within one season. Seed it in early spring, let it do its thing, and resist the urge to deadhead everything. The seed heads feed overwintering beneficial insects too. The fifth piece, physical exclusion used strategically. I want to be straight with you here. This system will not eliminate every pest, and I'd be doing you a disservice to pretend otherwise. If you're in a high-pressure year, or if you're new to a plot with compacted, depleted soil that's going to take 2 or 3 seasons to fully recover, you will still have pest problems. The biology takes time to build. That's where targeted physical exclusion comes in, and the key word is targeted. Not row cover over everything from April to October. That creates its own problems with pollination and heat buildup. Specific cover over specific vulnerable crops during specific windows. Brassicas, cabbage, broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts benefit enormously from lightweight insectary netting from transplant until the plants are 10 inches tall and well established. That first month is when cabbage loopers and imported cabbage worm moths do the most damage, and a simple wire hoop with netting draped over it, edges pinned to the ground with garden staples, stops them completely without any spray at all. For squash, if you're in a high vine borer zone, roughly zone 4 through zone 7 east of the Rockies, a single layer of row cover from transplant until the first female flowers appear buys you 4 to 6 weeks of clean growth. Remove it for pollination, then leave the plants uncovered for the season.
By that point, the vines are thick enough to survive a partial borer infestation without collapsing. The investment is small. Quality insect netting costs $15 to $30 for a 10-foot section and lasts 5 or more seasons if you store it properly, folded dry in a bag at the end of the year. Common mistakes that undercut the whole system. A few things I see consistently that erase a lot of the progress people make. Pulling the insectary border plants the moment they get messy. Dill that's gone to seed looks ragged. Leave it. That's where the eggs and larvae of your beneficial insects are living. Tidying it up in August is essentially evicting your pest control workforce right when you need them most. Overusing even organic sprays during bloom time. Spinosad, pyrethrin, even copper fungicide. These are not selective. They kill beneficial insects alongside pest insects. And if you're spraying during the window when your insectary border is in full flower and attracting beneficials, you're undermining the whole system. If you must spray, do it at dusk when pollinators and most beneficial insects are less active, and never spray open flowers directly. Replanting the same family in the same bed 2 years running. Past populations in soil-borne pathogens that specialize in one prop family, think clubroot in brassicas or verticillium wilt cycling through tomatoes, build up in the soil where that crop grew. A simple 2-year rotation, moving each plant family at least 3 feet from where it grew the previous season, breaks that cycle almost entirely. Map your beds on a piece of paper each spring. It takes 10 minutes, and it's worth every one of them. And finally, starting too big. The gardeners I've seen get the most out of this system in the first season were the ones who picked 1 or 2 beds and did it properly, rather than trying to retrofit every square foot of their garden at once. Get the soil test done on your main bed. Plant the insectary strip along one edge. Rearrange one bed into a mixed planting. Watch what happens. Build from there.
All right, you've been patient, and I told you at the beginning that I'd save the most important lesson for last, so here it is. After looking deeper into traditional Amish gardening methods, I realized something surprising. The biggest difference wasn't a special spray, it wasn't a hidden ingredient, it wasn't one plant that magically kept every pest away. It was the way the entire garden was designed. The gardens that stood out weren't trying to create a battle zone between the gardener and every insect that arrived. They were built around balance. Instead of asking, how do I kill this pest when it appears, the question was, how do I create a garden where pests have a much harder time becoming a serious problem? And that shift changes everything, because every part of this system works together. Healthy soil creates stronger plants. Mixed planting makes it harder for pests to locate large areas of their favorite crops. Proper timing helps plants avoid the worst pressure periods. Flowering borders bring in beneficial insects that help keep pest populations balanced, and targeted protection gives vulnerable plants extra support when they need it most. None of these methods are perfect by themselves, but together, they create layers of protection, and that's the real lesson behind traditional gardening. The goal was never to create a garden with absolutely no insects. A completely insect-free garden is not a healthy garden. The goal was to create a garden where beneficial life could thrive and where destructive pests had a much harder time taking over. Quick recap of the full system. Start with healthy, well-balanced soil. Break up large blocks of the same crop by adding diversity. Pay attention to timing instead of waiting for damage to appear. Create habitat for beneficial insects with flowering plants. Use physical protection only when plants are most vulnerable. And, most importantly, think about prevention before reaction. Because the strongest gardens aren't the ones where the gardeners fight the hardest. They're the ones where the garden itself is working with them. Here's what I want you to do this week, in this order. If you haven't tested your soil recently, start there. Knowing what your garden actually needs prevents years of guessing. 2. Look at your current layout and find one area where you can break up a large block of the same crop. 3. Add a few beneficial insect plants like dill, sweet alyssum, yarrow, or native flowers near your vegetable beds. 4. Identify your biggest pest problem from previous seasons and protect that crop during its most vulnerable stage. And 5. Spend a few minutes each week simply observing your garden. Look at the insects, the plant health, and the changes happening around you. That's the system, not a miracle product, not an expensive solution, just a smarter way of building a garden that becomes stronger, more balanced, and more resilient every season. If this changed the way you think about pest control, consider subscribing. In the next video, we'll look at another traditional gardening technique that can help your plants grow stronger while reducing common problems naturally. See you then.